Okay guys, here's what we're going to cover today, is we are going to cover the cell cycle, right? Before we jump into that, let's make sure we go back over some stuff about DNA. We know that DNA is my genetic info, right? That it codes for my entire organism, which is super important. It's a double helix, right? It's made of nucleotides. And my nucleotides, remember, were my phosphate, sugar, and then some type of nitrogen base. And those nitrogen bases can either be A's or T's, and C's or G's, and that's how they pair up with each other. And then, if I need to make a copy of DNA, I go through replication, right? And the reason I would want to copy my DNA is, remember, my cell is a living thing, right? Cell is a living thing, so cells need to be able to grow, they need to be able to repair themselves, and sometimes we're going to have to replace cells. So that's why I would want to copy my DNA, is so whenever my cell, here he is, and then he splits, that I have DNA here, that when he splits, I'll have the right DNA right here because I doubled it somewhere in the middle over here. So what we need to do is we need to define cell cycle first before we do anything with it. So cell cycle, by definition, is to create new cells. That's all I'm doing, is I need to create new cells because I either need to grow, I need to repair, or I need to replace. But I have to do a couple other processes able to get to where I can actually make a new cell. Now the cell cycle that we're going to go through today is called an asexual cell cycle. So we need to do word roots. A, right, means without, and then sex is referring to egg and sperm. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to make new cells, but I'm not going to use egg and sperm. All right? The types of cells that go through asexual cell cycle, these are body cells, right? And then body cells have a really fancy name because, science, these are called somatic cells. Which makes sense that my body cells would have to create new cells without egg and sperm. I mean, imagine that if here's your leg, and maybe you got a cut on your leg at some point. Well, your leg healed, right? Like over a time frame, you don't have a cut anymore. That's because your cells needed to grow, and they needed to repair, and they needed to replace. But you didn't have to involve egg and sperm in that at all. Your body just did that on its own. Or when you guys were created, here I'll kind of draw it up here, you know that your dad's sperm and your mom's egg came together, and then here you were. But now you guys are trillions of cells big. No egg and sperm were involved after this point. It was just you. And so your cells went through asexual cell cycle, so that way you could grow into a tiny little baby, and then you can grow into your big adult form like you are today, right? So that's where we're going with this, is we're just going to go through the process of how we make a new cell. All right, so to kind of reiterate, I'm just going to keep saying the same thing over and over again. We're talking about asexual cell cycle, right? A means without, sex, egg, and sperm. So we're doing this without the involvement of egg and sperm. We will eventually, just not today. And the types of cells that are going through this are body cells, and a body cell has a fancy name called a somatic cell. All right, so let's go through step one of the asexual cell cycle. Step one is called interphase. All right, interphase, couple points about it, is first off, this is where my cell is going to do normal cell functions, right? My cells have to operate as they're supposed to make your organism do its job, or to be able to continue living. So if you guys were to look underneath a microscope, most of the cells would be in this interphase stage because that's where normal functions are happening. So normal functions, and this is where it spends a majority of its time. Now interphase is going to be broken up into 3 stages, okay? Interphase is 3 stages. My first stage is called G1, and we'll go through what it does. My second stage is called S, and my third stage is called G2. Alright, so here's what we're going to do in G. G stands for growth. So my cell is going to get a little bit bigger, and then after he gets a little bit bigger, this times 2, that means double, he's going to double all the organelles inside. That makes sense, because if I have a cell, so let's just say, alright, let's say I want to start this whole process. Here's my starting cell, here's my nucleus, here's my DNA, and then we'll just kind of highlight an organelle right here. So this can be an organelle. That organelle can be anything. It can be the mitochondria, it can be the ribosomes, it can be a Golgi, it doesn't matter. So this is my starting cell. By the way, my starting cell, where did you start from? Your parents. So my starting cell is always called my parent cell. Now, after my parent cell, I'm going to go through, oh, it's the wrong color, sorry. I'm going to go through G1, which means I still have that, I still have this, but now, instead of having 1 organelle, I have 2 organelles. Because when my cell splits, I need to make sure that I have the appropriate number in each one. Otherwise my cell isn't going to function like if it does. Like if I didn't double my mitochondria, one cell might have enough, but the other cell wouldn't have any. Alright, next stage, S. S stands for synthesis. And during synthesis, again, times 2, that's double, I'm doubling my DNA. This is where replication happens. And remember, replication was just like when my A's went with my T's and my C's went with my G's. So now, after G1, here's my cell, here's my nucleus. Remember, I doubled my organelles, so there's an organelle, there's an organelle. And now, instead of having 1 chromosome, I have that replicated chromosome that we talked about a long time ago. Alright, then my last stage, G, still stands for growth. And after I finish growing, I'm going to prepare to divide. Because I just doubled everything. I doubled my organelles up here, I doubled my DNA. Well, right now my cell has double of everything. All he has to do is start to divide. So that way I can have the appropriate number of organelles in each of my 2 new cells, right? So here's my new cell right here, here's my new cell right here. So I have to divide the organelles, I have to divide my DNA. That's the second stage of asexual cell cycle, is now we just have to divide everything. Alright, so remember, this is still asexual cell cycle. The first thing I did was interphase, which was G1, S, G2, and now my second stage of asexual reproduction is mitosis. Alright, mitosis by definition is the division of my nucleus. Well, that's all well and good, but let's think about what my nucleus actually holds. My nucleus holds my DNA. So what am I doing during mitosis? I'm going to divide that DNA that I just doubled during interphase. Okay, so now we just need to draw what that looks like, right? So here's my cell. This is after interphase. We'll draw the whole thing here in a minute. After interphase. So there was that. I had a nucleus. I had doubled my DNA, that's why I have a replicated chromosome right there, and I had double organelles. Okay, so now all I have to do is I have to go through my next stage, which is mitosis. So I just have to start splitting all of that stuff that I have there in my cell. Alright, first thing to do to start splitting this is if I need to end up moving my DNA, I have to get rid of the nucleus. So that nucleus starts to disappear. Remember, I still have my replicated chromosomes in there. And then I have my doubled organelles. Alright, that was your first step. Second step, imagine, when we start thinking about division, think about if you had a big bag of Halloween candy and you have to divide it with your friend. Well, you're not going to keep the big bag of candy all the way in the corner by you to divide it. What you're going to do is you're going to take your big bag of candy and you're going to move everything in the middle of you, so that way you know you split it fair. So my replicated chromosome, he's going to go to the middle of my cell, and then these organelles, they're going to start to move to the opposite ends of my cell. So that way, when my cell splits, I'll have an organelle on one side, I'll have an organelle on the other. Alright, well now that we have my chromosome in the middle, I have to split my chromosome. Pretty easy. So here's my organelles. Remember, I have one over on one side, one over on the other. And then this replicated chromosome, he just splits in half. So one half goes to one side, and then that other half, he goes to the other. So that way, when my cell splits again, like just pretend it's going to split down the middle, that means I'll make sure to have one set of DNA over here, I'll have one set of DNA over here, I'll have one organelle over here, I'll have one organelle over there. Now that I've split everything, now my cell is actually going to start to divide itself. Well, now that everything's where it's supposed to be, I can have my nucleus back. My nucleus will hold that chromosome, and then I'll have my organelles there. Alright, then last stage, right, of asexual cell cycle is called cytokinesis. Cytokinesis, by definition, is the division of cytoplasm. Right? And so all I'm going to do, so right here at this point, I'm going to go through cytokinesis, K-I-N-E-S-I-S, sorry, cytokinesis, and now my cell is going to split. So there's one cell, there's two cells, each cell gets a nucleus, each cell has a chromosome inside, and each cell has an organelle. And look at that, those things are identical to the thing we started with, right? Like that looks exactly like that. That looks exactly like that. These two cells that I just made right here, these are called daughter cells, right? Daughter cells, I make two of them, and they're identical to each other, which again is super duper important, because when we talked about way long ago with my cell membrane, is that my cells have to be able to talk to each other. Well, now that they're identical, they can actually speak to each other. I mean, imagine if one spoke one language and then the other one spoke another. Like if I took one of you guys and threw you in a French-speaking school. Well, communication would be difficult. That means jobs wouldn't get done. All right, well, your cells have to perform a job. They have to make your organism function. So we need these to be identical. So that way, well, sorry, it wasn't identical to that because that was after interphase. But we need these two cells to be identical to each other because they have to be able to communicate with each other. So let's go ahead and draw this whole process, right? So this is asexual cell cycle, right? We're going to start with a parent cell. So here's my parent cell, here's my nucleus. Inside my nucleus, I have a chromosome, and then we'll just say I have one organelle. It doesn't really matter what it is. All right, so my cell, he got a trigger. He either needs to repair himself, he needs to replace himself, or we just need more cells, right? Doesn't matter. We have to have one of those situations. So I'm going to enter this cell cycle, and I'm going to start with interphase. Right? So I have my cell, and he's going to go through G1. Remember, G1 is I got bigger, and I'm going to double my organelles. So instead of having one organelle, now I have two. My DNA, though, stayed the same. All right, now, next, I go to S. So this is going to be my S stage. Still have a nucleus, still have two organelles. There's one, there's two. But instead of having just one chromosome, I have a replicated chromosome. All right, awesome. I've doubled my DNA. Then after S, here's my next stage. I'm going to go through G2. My cell got a little bit bigger. Still have a nucleus. I have my replicated chromosome in here. And I have my two organelles. All of this right here, this is interphase, right? My entire purpose of interphase is to double my contents. So that way when I split my cell, I will have the right amount in each one. So now I need to go through my next part. I need to go through mitosis. And remember, mitosis was the division of my nucleus, right? So now that I've doubled everything up here, I just have to divide that stuff. So here's my first stage. Remember, if I want to divide my DNA, I have to get rid of my nucleus, otherwise he's stuck in there. So my nucleus starts to disappear. I have my replicated chromosome there, and then I have my two organelles. All right, after I do that, then it's just your bag of candy, so I have to divide it. Here's my cell, and now my chromosomes, or my replicated chromosomes, are going to line up in the middle. So that way, when I split them, they split evenly. And then these organelles, one will go to one side, and the other will go to the other side. So that way when my cell splits in half, I'll have the right amount. Then, after I get everything in the middle, my cell knows, okay, well, I can start dividing it. So half of my replicated chromosome will go to one side, the other half will go to this side, and then I already have my organelles over here. So I have organelle over here, organelle over here. All right, now that everything is divided correctly, my cell actually starts to split, right? Which means I get a nucleus back. I have a chromosome here, I have a chromosome here, I have an organelle here, I have an organelle here, and now I just have to go through my last stage, which is cytokinesis, which is the division of my cytoplasm. So now I just have to take that cell, he's going to split, so now I have two cells, I have two nuclei, I have a chromosome here, I have a chromosome here, I have an organelle here, I have an organelle here, which means these guys, right, I just made two, I spelled identical wrong, two identical daughter cells. Just look, that's identical to that guy, that's identical to that guy. And since they're identical, that means they can talk to each other, right? The types of cells that are going through this whole asexual cell cycle, these are body, which are somatic cells, okay? And this down here, when everything was dividing, this was mitosis, right? Double everything during interphase, divide it during mitosis, so that way when my cell actually splits, I have the exact same thing in every cell, which is really important because cells have to be able to communicate. All right, last little thing, one, just more terminology, of course. We need to talk about another word called diploid. Diploid means the total number of chromosomes for an organism. Okay, that means this is the number that I need for my cell to function. Because if I don't have enough DNA, my cell won't know what to do. If I have too much DNA, there's just too much. Think about if every teacher on White Day gave you guys, 5 assignments in each class. You guys would be overwhelmed and you wouldn't even know where to start. It's kind of the same thing. So we have to have a perfect number of chromosomes for my cells to function. All right, when I look at my body versus somatic cells, they have the diploid number. All right? And we'll just kind of draw it out. It's not too hard to understand. So let's say here's my cell, and I'll make the nucleus really big so you guys can see it. And maybe they have 2 chromosomes, all right? So their diploid number is 2, all right? So now I'm going to go through cell cycle, right? We need to divide my DNA. So I'm going to replicate everything first. So here's my replicated chromosome for that guy. Here's my replicated chromosome for that guy. Then my cell is going to split. So there's daughter cell, and when he splits, I'll have 2 over here, I'll have 2 over here, which means my daughter cells is also diploid, which is the total number that this cell needed to function. Whenever you see diploid, it can be written in a different way. Diploid is also called 2N, which makes sense because this 2 right here, it's coming from that you get 2 copies of every gene. You get one from mom, you get one from dad. Okay? So our body cells are diploid because that's the number of chromosomes I need to function. So just for this whole asexual mitosis bit, just science, whenever I go through mitosis and cell cycle, I start with diploid, I end with diploid, because I need these cells to be identical to each other. All right, that is cell cycle, that's mitosis. You guys know where to find me if you have any questions.